Welcome, everyone, to the US Web Design System monthly call for October 2024. Clearly in the middle of spooky season, with Halloween only a couple weeks away. The USWDS logo is trying to get its costume ready. It's doing its best to be a vampire, but as we can see here with the two triangles in red and the rest in black, it's still having trouble getting the fangs to look right. Slide 2. My name is Dan Williams, he, him, and I'm the USWDS project lead. And here on screen is my avatar. Dark hair, blue sweater, collared shirt, glasses. Today, real life me is wearing a gray shirt, warm red pants, and some pinkish socks, approximately violet warm 10. As Jeannie mentioned, we are recording this call, and I'm happy to say we've started to be able to share the recordings of these monthly calls publicly. You can find pretty much everything from the last year's worth of monthly calls back to January 2023 on our website at designsystem.digital.gov/about/monthly-calls. We typically post videos shortly after the monthly call, and we also link out to the slides and the script hosted at Digitalgov. We've also started collecting each month's Q&A as a GitHub discussion linked from the monthly calls page. We've posted a link to our monthly calls page in the chat. We'll be posting links and other references into the chat as we go along. And today we're trying something that we started doing last month when it comes to chats and questions. Today in your Zoom window, you'll find a Q&A button in addition to the chat button, possibly under a More button. We'd like to encourage folks to ask questions in the Q&A section instead of the chat. Take a sec now to find the Q&A section and open it up. If any member of their team can answer your question in the Q&A section, we'll do so. Otherwise, there'll be some time for questions and answers at the end of the hour. But the chat's still nice too. Let's use the chat for introducing ourselves or for any other comments or discussion. Be sure to introduce yourself in the chat. It's nice to know who's here. And it's good to have you here today. For those of you who find the chat distracting, you're welcome to close or hide those discussions during the main presentation. You can reopen them later during the Q&A at the end of the call. So thanks. And with that, let's get started with slide 3. So what's our agenda for today? Well, we've got a bit of a sort of back to basics call today. First, we've got a new product feature with featured sites and a few quick USWDS product updates. And then we'll talk about values, how we're thinking about our product and engineering values as we look ahead, behind, all around, and toward future generations of the design system. And then we'll have some time for Q&A at the end, fingers crossed. Hopefully, more time than we've had left in recent calls. We'll see. Slide 4. So let's get into it with today's featured sites. We've got a nice new product to highlight today, one we've been using recently and actually for a long time, in fact. Slide 5. So recently, cloud.gov Pages, which you can find at pages.cloud.gov, released 2 automated site reports, the Pages Accessibility Report and the Pages Vulnerability Report. Now, Pages is a publishing platform for modern 21st century idea conformant websites, and we use it for hosting the USWDS website. And these once a month automated site reports check your websites for potential security vulnerabilities and accessibility issues. They estimate the severity of the found issues and suggest fixes for common problems. The Pages Accessibility Report uses the open source AxeCore project to identify common website accessibility issues. And the Pages Vulnerability Report is powered by the Z attack proxy, or ZAP, to detect risks like data exposure and security flaws. On the slide, we see a screenshot of an accessibility report for one of our GitHub branches, the one where we were building our breadcrumb accessibility checklist. It shows 2 accessibility errors, one serious and one minor. This page is a solid combination of USWDS default styles and some custom functionality built just for this display. And yes, we do have a couple accessibility issues we're working to assess and fix. Slide 6. So congratulations and great work there. Be sure to let our team know when a new site launches, either with an email or a note on the USWDS public Slack channel. Slide 7. So now for a few product updates. Slide 8. As promised, sweat smile emoji. We released USWDS 3.9.0 at the beginning of this month. I won't spend a third monthly call outlining what you can find in this release, but if you'd like to check it out, we're posting a link to the release notes in the chat. Slide 9. And based on our experience with some of our recent large releases, we're moving to a new methodology for releases, scheduling consistent monthly cadence for releases and releasing what's ready by the monthly deadline, and not building out release contents ahead of time and releasing only when all those items are ready. So every month, reliable release, TBD always what's going to be in that release. We hope that this new approach will improve the velocity of releases and prevent slower work from blocking any of these releases. Slide 10. So November's release is most likely a point release, USWDS 3.9.1. And a couple of the items we have on deck are a fix for an inconsistency in the internal JavaScript for modal. This is an internal change pointed out by the Touchpoints team. Now the code will better align to our code standards and best practices. So thank you, Touchpoints. We also expect an update to the styling of row headers in the table component to match those for column headers. Simplified screen reader instructions in Combo Box and Time Picker, and probably some more too. But look out for our November release in early November. We'll talk about it next month. We'll talk about it in the newsletter, etc. Slide 11. We're also continuing progress publishing accessibility test pages. We've got 4 new ones up on the site now, focused on navigation, breadcrumb, pagination, in-page navigation, and side navigation. We're posting links to those new pages in the chat. Next up are time picker, file input, and memorable date. So stay tuned for those in November. Slide 12. Next, checking in on public discussions. We have a few new component proposals for a CUI banner, heat map, and toast, as well as a new pattern proposal for pre-filled form. There's also a new discussion about supporting USWDS solutions in native mobile applications. This month's accessibility discussion is about going beyond visual design, and we've also posted the Q&A from the September monthly call in the discussion Q&A section. So there's a lot going on in discussions, so check that out. Slide 13. In Web Components world, the Web Components 0.0.1 alpha package is out now on NPM for installation and testing. This package includes Banner Beta 1 and Link Beta 1. In development, we've got Identifier Beta 1, as well as Beta 2 for both Banner and Link. We've also started work on text input and card, which are both in pre-alpha. And finally, we're digging into compatibility between Lit and Stencil.js by starting up a Stencil.js testing sandbox. So continued progress there as well. Slide 14. Lastly, as I mentioned last month, it's been a bit over 5 years since we released USWDS 2, and it's finally time to sunset the version 1 documentation site. We've targeted the end of the year as a decommissioning date. So reach out at our email address, uswds@gsa.gov, if your team uses any aspect of the 1.0 site in your day-to-day work. And we can try to determine if there's anything we should keep before we decommission that site altogether. Slide 15. So this month, we're talking about product and engineering values for the design system. Why do we have them? What are they used for? And how might they help us navigate the many difficult questions we need to answer as we put together a vision for the future of the design system? It's a big topic, so let's get into it with a couple of my colleagues and teammates. So first, Matt Henry, the engineering lead on the USWDS team. Matt, can you introduce yourself and give a quick self-description for anyone audio only?
Sure can. Thanks, Dan. Yes, Matt Henry, as Dan said, engineering lead for the USWDS. He, him, based in Raleigh, North Carolina, and I'm a white man with close crop white beard, looking autumnal in a light denim jacket, plaid shirt, and orange beanie.
For sure. Thanks, Matt. And slide 17, I'd also like to introduce, oh, wait, I didn't put up Matt's slide. There's Matt's slide. And now there's Anne's slide. I'd also like to introduce Anne Petersen, our experienced design lead. Anne, can you introduce yourself and give a quick self-description?
Sure can. I'm Anne. My pronouns are they, them, and visually I'm white with short brown hair. The front's a little bit fluffy today. Small glasses, large headphones, and a blue collared shirt. Back to you, Dan.
Thank you, Anne. In fact, I'd like to pass it right back to you to help us set the stage for talking about values.
Great, thank you. Thanks, this is Anne again. Slide 18, so why are we talking values? Slide 19. Well, USWDS just turned 9 years old. 9 years. Slide 20. We launched on September 28th, 2015. Slide 21. Our first design principles were published on our wiki in 2016. The table of contents on the slide here for this set is web standards, progressive enhancement, and performance. And the wiki notes these are a draft, but let's take a second to pay attention to them. They're a good indicator of our future. Web standards, progressive enhancement, and performance, right? Slide 22. Here's the next version of our design principles from December 2016 as a screenshot with the icons from that site. I'll spell these out on slide 23. They were make the best thing the easiest thing, be accessible out of the box, design for flexibility, and reuse, reuse, reuse. Slide 24, which led to our current design principles. Start with real user needs, earn trust, embrace accessibility, promote continuity, listen. Slide 25. And these design principles apply to everything that uses USWDS. They definitely apply to us. They're probably appropriate for your work too. Slide 26. And yes, they still apply. This is the yes emoji from our Slack that's nodding and pointing along with me. Yes, logical, sound, what government work needs. Slide 27. But what about USWDS itself? What might we need that's more specific? Slide 28. How do we make decisions that are particular to USWDS? Slide 29. To do the things that we do best, to serve the public and to support you. Let's back up to our reason for being, what we're doing, and why. Slide 30. In September 2023, a year ago, roundabout, we refreshed our mission and vision and created our pole star. Slide 31. Just to remind you how we're defining these, our mission is our statement of purpose, our why. Our vision is what problems we want to solve and for who. And our pole star shows how we want to work to get there. Slide 32. So our mission, shaping the future of government digital services. Slide 33. Our vision, empowered and supported digital service teams, familiar and easy to use digital services. 34. Our pole star. We help government teams align, design, and keep their websites and services up to date. Slide 35. So those show us our general direction, but we have to make more specific decisions. Slide 36. How? Slide 37. So we certainly make decisions by building on research with the public. Slide 38. By building on research with you. Slide 39. By building on current technological developments. Slide 40. And by building on expectations. 41. But even then, we're often faced with multiple absolutely reasonable options. Slide 42. So, like you, I would expect, we make decisions based on the information we have available to us, and we keep learning. Slide 34. But we can also make decisions based on the values that guide us. Slide 44. Now, if we don't have the exact same values of other teams, those other teams may make different decisions. Slide 35, and that is totally reasonable. 46. We all have to remember that our context is different. We all have different priorities, if only because the people we serve most directly have differing priorities. Slide 47. The thing that we have to keep front and center is that USWDS is foundational. It's beneath all else. From one dictionary definition, a foundation is the lowest load-bearing part of a building, typically below ground level. Slide 48. which makes these decisions hard because everything above us depends on us. So we need a structure, a framework, which will guide our decisions to keep us tacking towards the right star. That is, toward our pole star, our vision, and our mission. And telling you about this structure, these product and engineering values, can help you understand why we're making the decisions that we do, and maybe even anticipate them. Slide 49. I'll turn it over to Dan to go into detail on our product value.
Awesome. Thank you, Anne. This is Dan again. Slide 50. Earlier, Anne mentioned the USWDS design principles of start with real user needs, earn trust, embrace accessibility, promote continuity, and listen. These principles are a bit like service principles for projects that build with USWDS. They're meant for everyone. We follow them. You all follow them. These service principles provide a general decision-making framework for projects across government. But of course, we're all building different things. There are all kinds of justifiable decisions that can flow from these principles. As we said, how do we work in the service of these principles? What values help guide USWDS as a unique product in the US government? Slide 52. Longtime followers of the design system will rightfully point out that USWDS already has product values, and you can find them at designsystem.digital.gov/about/product values. These are put user needs first, make it easy to do the right thing. Accessibility is fundamental. Start from existing solutions. Be consistent, not static, and share what we do. Not bad, pretty good, still relevant. But looking through these values, you'll see a number of items that could be redundant with the service principles we've captured in the USWDS design principles. And that's because these product values predate the design principles and helped inform those design principles. As we move forward with the design system, it's the right time to take another look at our product values in the context of the overall design principles and in the context of what we've learned about the design system in the 6 years since we drafted our current values. What's changed? Slide 53. For me, the biggest thing that's changed is that we've learned more about what makes this design system unique and effective. And my biggest insight over that time is that, we're more than a code base, more than a style guide, more than guidance and principles, more than a website. Those things are all super important, critical even. But I've found some of the biggest value in connections between teams across government and in helping to provide a shared problem space and shared solution space for working through the many questions and discoveries, the hard-earned successes and setbacks, the small joys and irritations that we share working on the web. At its best, the design system can act as a kind of nervous system, connecting and coordinating the good work happening across teams, agencies, and silos. It's definitely not just a broadcast mechanism, but a network of two-way communication, a system that's more than its component parts. Slide 54. So, what's important to this system? As we chart a path ahead, here's what we've identified. And we'll look at them all together before digging into each one. Compliance is the baseline. Design is adaptation. Strengthen connections. Easier, earlier, and be a good steward. Slide 55. Let's start with design is adaptation. If we're here to facilitate design, what is design? Design is a process of adaptation, of fitness, of fitting a decision to its context. Design is a process that happens again and again as the context changes, as we try to learn, as the feedback cycle roll endlessly forward. We're here to support design work by engineers, UX designers, visual and product designers, researchers, writers, accessibility specialists, product managers, contributors of all kinds. Everyone designs. So how can we help encourage, coordinate, and develop alongside this process? We build by building. We develop tools not just for painting by numbers, but for building new things and improving existing things. We're less of a model airplane kit and more of a toolbox. We work from existing solutions. If design is adaptation, we find something to adapt. We try to avoid the blank page. We're consistent, not static. We embrace the inevitability and necessity of change. We experiment. We try to identify those aspects in which we feel most confident and try to find stability, but we resist fixity. In short, we support design. Slide 57. If design is adaptation, we favor choices that help discover new solutions. Slide 58. Next, compliance is the baseline. Slide 59. We're a government team that understands what government teams need, including compliance with things like Section 508 and 21st Century IDEA. We're here to make that easier, but we can't stop there. We have a government focus and government responsibilities. While we support the fundamentals of interface design, we're also here to identify and develop patterns and components that support government-specific needs. And we need to bear in mind not only government technical requirements, but what our sites and services require of our audiences. We know how important government services can be at certain times and in certain situations. Sometimes folks don't have a choice. Sometimes using our site is a requirement. What we provide has to work, and it has to work well. We start with compliance, but go further. We need to provide compliance from the start, but we also want to support and shape best practices that go beyond compliance, that frequently aren't always requirements. And we support mission focus. We want to help a broad, diverse range of teams work in the service of their unique mission and simplify the digital design minutia that sometimes gets in the way. Slide 60. Because compliance is the baseline, we favor choices that help teams meet and exceed requirements. Slide 61. We strengthen connections. Slide 62. We can't and shouldn't do this alone. As I'd mentioned earlier, the design system isn't a broadcast mechanism. It's a way we can work together across teams, agencies, and silos to identify, share, and scale solutions. We can do this by developing a working language. We want teams from across agencies to share solutions just as much as we want designers to communicate with developers. A working language serves as a kind of continuity between different varieties of solutions. We want to lower the barriers to contribution. The design system is better the more people use it and contribute to it. We work in the open. The process is a part of the product. Working in the open doesn't just provide access and insight. It doesn't only help provide surprises for the teams that use the design system. It doesn't just share and scale what we've learned. It does all these important things. But working in the open means really acknowledging ups and downs. Communicating the ups and downs helps us assume less. It helps us be more proactive, honest, straightforward, and humble. When we're learning in the open as well, it introduces a vulnerability that can be an opening for connection and participation. We meet teams where they are. We got to be practical. All the words and values and ideals are worth a lot less if teams can't use them to help design and build government websites and services. We need to work to be realistic and understand real constraints. When we support reusability. If we can't share and scale if teams can't use and reuse what we deliver. We need to be reusing, teams need to be reusing. We need to develop solutions that are portable. Slide 63. If we want to strengthen connections, we favor choices that improve communication. Slide 64. The next product value is easier, earlier. Slide 65. Everyone starts somewhere. Let's make that place as good as it can be, especially when that place is a place of unfamiliarity. Our design system needs to do a lot, and it needs to support significant customization and configuration. But we need to simplify the first interaction. We need to structure our product so the first door is the easiest door to open and walk through. So the first choice is the simplest. We want to flatten the learning curve. We want to provide an easier path through the product. This isn't only about usability, but understanding the right user needs at the right time. We want to provide good defaults. We want to start somewhere good. We want to be thoughtful about the starting point. We can't require customization to make the product work properly. What can we do to provide good functionality out of the box? We add complexity later. We need to identify the simple interaction and work from there. Don't lead with everything all at once. We don't need to avoid complexity, but our first priority is the simpler interaction. And we want to support the next step. We don't want to make the distance between steps too great. People get stuck when the next step isn't obvious or isn't a natural progression from the previous step. We have to support progression. Slide 66. If we want to get to easier earlier, we favor choices that enable the beginner. Slide 67. And finally, be a good steward. Slide 68. We're here with the support of public resources. To that end, we work not only to build better tools, but to provide performance, efficiency, government, and institutional memory to use our resources well. A big part of this is that we're here for the long haul. We're a long-term solution that will be supporting teams long after the first design or redesign. We need to work together and change together. Maintainability becomes a higher priority when we're in it for the long haul. Staying up to date isn't about conformance, it's about supporting long-term success. Make the case. Teams are independent. They have their own missions, opinions, audiences, and constraints. We not only respect our colleagues when we make the case for what we do, we understand that working together has costs as well as benefits. Not only does technical implementation have a cost, but justification has a cost as well. We're not giving orders, we're trying to build a case. We want to collect research broadly from all types of teams and make decisions with that evidence. This helps not only understand how we need to change, but lowers the cost of making that change. We want to collect and scale expertise. Not every design and engineering decision can scale, but we should work hard to identify those that can. Design and engineering are expensive, but valuable. Sharing solutions not only helps every team do more, it shapes the best practices that may become expectations. Collecting and scaling expertise helps prepare every team for the best practices of the future. And support the process. The process is the core mechanic. In the long term, we think how we work is at least as important as the tools we deliver. We think that the only way to consistently look ahead and adapt to the unknown of the future is to have a process that keeps us connected to teams, communicating with teams, and open to new possibilities. Slide 69. If we want to be a good steward, we favor choices that take a practical, long-term perspective. Slide 70. So now I'd like to pass it to Matt to talk about engineering values.
Thanks, Dan. Slide 71. The author and designer Frank Camaro gave a talk in 2015 called The Web's Grain about the power of designing websites in a way that embraces the possibilities and limitations inherent to the web platform and the devices we use to interact with it. He meant grain in the sense that wood has a grain. So designing with the web's grain then is like cutting wood in the direction of its grain. Today, we're talking more about building technology than designing interactions, but I bring it up because the idea of the web having a grain is an important one that applies to just about every aspect of how we make all the things for the platform. Slide 72. So what does it mean to build technology with the grain of the web? Slide 73. One thing it could mean is to use each part of the web platform for its intended purpose. That is, use HTML to structure a document's content, use CSS to modify the page's appearance, and use JavaScript to add behaviors and complex interactivity. Another way of saying this might be to understand that what the primitive elements of the web are and use them for their intended purposes. This applies to the languages we use to build things on the web, but it also applies to the technologies and architectures that make up the web itself. Things like HTTP, which is the basic transfer protocol for sending data to your browser, URLs for creating unique addresses for all the content on the web, and hypertext for linking pages together, among others. Slide 74. Another thing it could mean is to embrace the quirks of the platform. As designers, developers, and content authors, we build websites and send them out into the world, but we have little to no control over the environment in which our pages will actually be viewed. We can also embrace this lack of control. We can use data to make educated guesses about the browsers and devices users will have, or the speed at which they'll be able to download everything we've sent them, but at the end of the day, we can't know for sure. If it's important for our audience to be able to see our content or complete tasks in our applications, we have to build things that work in as many environments and conditions as possible. And we have to recognize that even with the best analytics, we can't always be sure what those runtime environments will be. Slide 75. The web isn't just technology. It's also a set of conventions, norms, and expectations that have built up over time. Conventions like ways to dismiss modal pop-ups, best practices around information architecture and content design, among others. Building with the grain of the web means following these conventions. Slide 76. So these are some things that it might mean to build with the grain of the web, but so far we haven't talked about why it might be a good idea to do that. Slide 77. One reason is that the web platform is resilient by design. So embracing the platform is a way to leverage that resilience. Slide 78. The web is a medium for sharing content. So browsers work very hard to get that content to users if at all possible. When a browser encounters an unfamiliar HTML tag, it simply renders the tag's contents. This is just as true of custom element tags like the ones the design system's beginning to work with, as it is of malformed HTML. An undefined or a mistyped HTML element will render as if it's a div, since the platform is designed to try to get content in front of the end user no matter what. Similarly, for CSS, a browser will simply ignore any style rules it doesn't support. In the early days of what came to be called CSS3, a developer could add a border radius rule to their style sheet that would create rounded corners in browsers that supported the then new property, and older browsers would simply ignore the unfamiliar rule and render a pointy cornered box. HTML and CSS are designed to fail gracefully. Slide 79. JavaScript is arguably the most powerful part of the web platform stack in that it empowers developers to build entire applications that run in the browser. However, it's also the least resilient component of the platform. The more a developer uses JavaScript to get content, markup, or styles onto a page, the harder it is to take advantage of the web platform's native resilience. JavaScript can trade resilience for power. Slide 80. Another reason to build with the web's grain is performance. The web platform was built to be fast. Slide 81. This is true of every layer of the platform, from the basic network protocols up to the rendering engines in the browsers themselves. In describing his goals in designing HTTP, Tim Berners-Lee said, the target was fetch of about 1/10 of a second. It had to be, get this document in. Here it is. Slide 82. Similarly, browser vendors make every effort to make the web as fast as possible for users. The processes by which they do this are complicated, but ultimately amount to having smart priorities about the order in which the images that make up a web page are downloaded, parsed, rendered, executed. And this sequence, referred to as the critical path, is optimized to build the DOM first, then apply styles, then run JavaScript that might affect the DOM. Slide 83. One way of working with the grain of the web platform is to lean into this prioritization to take advantage of the work that the browser vendors are putting into making everything fast. The more foundational page structure, style, and content that a developer puts into JavaScript, the slower the overall experience might be for the end user. If a page's entire DOM is created in JavaScript, then that page will miss out on the inherent speed built into the first pass of the rendering process. The same applies to using JavaScript to apply styles. Optimal performance comes from building the page with semantic HTML first, then tweaking with JavaScript. Another way of saying this is that the fastest pages let the browser do the performance-intensive work in the order they were designed to do it. The more that a developer chooses to re-implement that rendering process themselves, the more responsibility they then have for the page's performance. JavaScript can trade performance for power. Slide 84. The inherent speed of the platform is in many ways a best-case scenario. There are all kinds of things that can make the web slow. Some of these things, like poor connectivity or slow devices, are out of developers' control. So the best we can do is build with these potential limitations in mind, work around them where possible, and do our best not to introduce more slowness ourselves. Slide 85. Accessibility is another area where embracing the web platform has a potential to yield better results than going in on scratch-built components. Slide 86. In just the same way that browser vendors work to make the web fast, they also put tremendous effort into making the web accessible to all, including assistive technology users. The simplest way to take advantage of this work is to use built-in, semantically rich HTML elements wherever possible. Slide 87. The danger of choosing to build components from scratch or from HTML that doesn't have its own semantics is that it becomes incumbent on the developer to manually and painstakingly add in support for accessibility APIs using tools like ARIA. While it's possible to build accessible applications that provide great experiences for assistive technology users in this way, it's much more difficult to do so. In addition to requiring much more development effort, it also necessitates a great deal more usability testing to ensure they're creating accessible, inclusive experiences. This isn't to say that teams using semantic HTML don't need to do usability testing, only that those who build fully custom components will need to do considerably more testing. Slide 88. As the W3C's Web Accessibility Initiative points out, no ARIA is better than bad ARIA. ARIA is not a quick fix for creating accessible sites and apps. Taking on the responsibility of adding landmarks for assistive tech runs the not insignificant risk of implementing those landmarks in a way that's more confusing than it is helpful. Again, the point of this is not to say that teams should never build their own components from scratch, but rather to suggest that they consider leveraging more robust and robustly accessible built-in solutions to the fullest extent possible. Slide 89. The upshot of this is that, as with performance and resilience, the more that teams elect to build components out of JavaScript, the more responsibility they take for ensuring that what they build works for all of their users. JavaScript can trade accessibility for power. Slide 90. What, in practical terms, does this all mean? Hopefully by this point, you're at least open to the idea that there are real tangible benefits to building with the grain of the web. But this is a presentation about the US web design system, so I want to talk now about some of the engineering values we think this idea implies, or that are at least compatible with this line of thinking. Slide 91, here they are. Embrace the platform. Support user experience with developer experience. Wear a layer. Write plain language code. Slide 92. First principle shouldn't be a huge surprise given the discussion so far. It's embrace the platform, or work with the grain of the web. I already talked a fair bit about what this means, but it's worth being specific about how it applies to the USWDS. Slide 93. One important aspect of embracing the platform is to help the platform do its job, or to use each part of the platform for its intended purpose. HTML should be semantic, and tags should describe the content they contain to the largest practicable extent. For USWDS web components, it means embracing the HTML web components architecture we talked about in September's monthly call. As a refresher, HTML web components are custom elements that have some HTML in between the opening and closing tags of the custom element. Building at least some of our components this way should allow page authors to write simple, think Web 1.0, markup, while the presentational markup, such as any extra divs or classes necessary for styling, stays mostly in the shadow DOM. Closely related to this is that USWDS needs to use progressive enhancement. HTML web components containing relatively simple markup will enable teams to deliver critical content no matter what. Building components this way will ensure that content is available before JavaScript runs, or even if it never does. But it also allows those components to apply all the design and behavior customizations that CSS and JavaScript allow if and when they become available. Avoid lock-in. Building with the web platform, and using its native idioms is a way to keep USWDS from being tied to any particular framework. Another way of saying this is that we should prefer native and web standard tools to third-party tools and libraries. However, we're a small team with a lot to do, so we can't always write everything from scratch ourselves. So when we do adopt a library, we should choose something lightweight, both light in terms of the amount of data sent over the wire, as well as how it changes web native behaviors. Migrating away from Sass and the tooling required to support it and towards CSS variables and custom properties is an example of how we're thinking about this today. Another way of saying this principle is to favor solutions closer to the grain. A related point to avoiding lock-in is reducing switching costs. By keeping our reliance on dependencies as low as possible, we'll be well positioned to move on from them if they stop working the way we need them to, or if a better alternative comes along. Another aspect of this is that we should pick tools that are not the most popular, but the most portable. Just because a library has widespread adoption doesn't necessarily mean that it will be a good fit for this project or its users. In general, we want to support the open standards of the web. Slide 94. When we embrace the platform, we favor choices that work with the grain of the web. Slide 95. The next value is to support user experience with developer experience. Slide 96. User experience shapes the tools. We're not working in a vacuum, and we're obviously not building for ourselves. We're building sites and services that others use. We need to make sure that we're building tools that make it easier for developers to build the kind of sites and services that work for the person using the site or service wherever they're coming from. Performance matters. It can be easy to lose track of the performance costs when we're using devices powerful enough to make it easy to build sites and services, but performance can have a real usability impact, a cost impact, and an energy impact. We have to work to keep that impact visible. We have to work to keep performance costs low. Make accessibility easier, not invisible. We have to be careful not to lose the user in the abstraction. It can be amazing and powerful to build accessible decisions into the tools we ship and the components we use, but we have to work to make sure that delivering and using accessible tools doesn't result in accessibility disappearing from view. Support repairability. Finally, the tools and products don't always work as they should. If a developer can work to fix something in one of our components, they shouldn't always have to wait for us. We should deliver components that teams could get into and open the box. We want teams to have the ability to repair and improve our work, first for their project, but hopefully also later for an improvement we can incorporate. Slide 97. When we support UX with developer experience, we favor choices that prioritize the end user experience. Slide 98. Recognize that we're a layer. USWDS is only going to be part of the stack you use to build sites and applications. Slide 99. So be a dependency, not a fork. We want to make it easier for teams to add USWDS to their projects in such a way as to maintain the connection between our work and theirs over time. Our opinions cascade. We need to be thoughtful about the impact that USWDS has on downstream teams. Recognize that choices made at the design system level establish the floor for performance and accessibility. If our components leverage too much JavaScript too early, that's a performance tax we pass on to every single user. Developers should be able to make their own choices about how much JavaScript to use and at what point they hand control of the page over to scripts. That doesn't mean that USWDS doesn't or can't be opinionated, but it does mean that the design system team needs to be thoughtful about how those opinions impact downstream users and ultimately the public users of products built with USWDS. Use semantic versioning. Be clear when things change. Semantic versioning is a kind of contract between developers and users. This contract gives you confidence that code that they're consuming isn't going to break anything in their code if they install it, unless the upstream team tells them ahead of time that the update contains a breaking change. USWDS will adopt semantic versioning for the web components package first, and then down the line revisit versioning for other parts of the design system. And being a layer means we have to support different tech stacks. If USWDS goes all in on a set of technologies, it may sound great to teams already using those tools, but it imposes significant costs on everyone else. But since we're all building for the web, the closer we stick to web standard technology, the easier it will be for every team that wants to use USWDS to do so. Slide 100. If we're a layer, we favor choices that are thoughtful about our impact. Slide 101. The last value I want to talk through with you today is that we should write plain language code. In government, we strive to use plain language in our content in order to make that content accessible to the broadest possible audience. This is something we should aim for in our code as well. Slide 102. Not everyone who uses USWDS is a front-end development expert. Indeed, not everyone using USWDS is a developer at all. In light of that, it's important that we write code that as many people as possible can understand, implement, and extend. So we write for reading. Recognize that all code we write has to be read by others as well as our future selves. Embrace the idiom. Write with the conversion of the language. Be cautious about how you introduce new abstractions, idiosyncrasies, or concepts. Documentation first. Integrate documentation tightly into the development process and make sure our docs are oriented towards helping developers get things done in their sites and apps. And support other developers. And finally, we use plain language so that others can follow along and contribute. Slide 103. If we write plain language code, we favor choices that open our code to more contributors. And now, pass it back to Dan to wrap us up.
All right. Thanks, Matt. I'm sorry, I put a typo in the script. I meant the convention of the language, not the conversion of the language. Right with the convention of the language and embracing the idiom. Typos. Anyhow, slide 104. Let's talk a little bit about what's next. Today we introduced some new product values. Design is adaptation. Compliance is the baseline. Strengthen connections. Easier earlier. And be a good steward. And new engineering values that support those product values. Embrace the platform. Support UX with developer experience. We're a layer and write plain language code. So where do we go from there? Well, as I mentioned, we got to be practical. Now we're working through how we move from values to product. Slide 105, or sorry, slide 106. Where am I? Working with values alongside product helps guide an agile and iterative process, both for our team and for yours. Like knowing where we're coming from can tell you where we're going. Slide 107. And, I know that the future looks interesting. Our core code base, design tokens and utilities, plus a simplified modular web component solution points to some promising directions for a powerful unified product that's able to grow and adapt. And I look forward to presenting more of this vision for that future for everyone next month. Doing a little bit of table setting. We're thinking about a lot of things as a team. We're going to get into some more of the details about what we're doing next month.